What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more Smashing Pumpkins, as well as Luca, who is immediately moving into position. Are you jumping up? And yes, we're returning to Adore, 1998. Thank you again to Sofia for providing this album. And the next track is Daphne Descends. So we have a name and motion. We have action and a description. So in that regard, I wonder whether descending is more literally, it's, about a visual of someone coming downstairs, or falling downward, perhaps even more ominously, or whether descent is more figurative, the idea of getting into a bad way, or having fortunes not turn in your favor, or perhaps becoming more wicked or immoral. And Daphne, it's a given name, so I imagine we're talking about someone female, but as to whether that's a person in an autobiographical sense related to Billy, or whether it's drawing upon some literary or cultural reference, or indeed maybe historical, I can't say at the outset, but I will see what I can pick up on a first listen. This is Smashing Pumpkins from their album Adore, 1998, and the track is Daphne Descends.
You miss him more than I You love him. You love him.
What a brilliant tune. That was fantastic. So I'll try to start with the Sonics. It felt like the whole track had this overexposed glare to it. Like everything's a bit too bright, but that makes everything have this like hazy luster to it. It felt very warm and enjoyable, even if it was a bit like off the rails or a bit like too bright. So I absolutely love the atmosphere of the track musically, and I enjoy the way that it had this smoothness to it, but in parts, and certainly by the end, it felt like it was almost like not on the right track, like it was, struggling to go forward normally and had this, again, like a bit out of control feel to it, and maybe there's some conceptual expression there lyrically or narratively, more on that in a moment. But I also like the way Billy is singing soft and mellow for most of the tune, and then about halfway through, he starts alternating with that and a more severe, intense, and like deeper, almost spoken word type of delivery. So there was suddenly like a stark contrast. And then by the end, when it becomes more isolated on the vocals, as the rest of the track seemed to sort of, fall apart or dismantle itself, the vocals of like "You Love Him," it felt a bit more like intense or like holding on to something, even if it was a bit dangerous or less sure or less obviously calm and in a warm, like comfortable place. So just the sonics and the vocals overall I think are really well done. And it almost seemed to have that like guitar effect where I always think of specifically in relation to the Smiths' How Soon Is Now, where it's like this echoed, like it's fluttering, it's not just like a straight chord, but it has again this like glow to it, and one that gives it a bit of an echo or, as I said, sort of overexposed sound. So lyrically, at first I thought what was happening is maybe the woman is worried that like actually that she's maybe cheating on him, or like, you love him more than this, you love him and no one else, but maybe she's having dalliances with guys like, pretty boys that she meets out in the world. It almost felt like the track was on like a subway train. I had that sort of image, but I think that was because of the sonics where, again, it felt like it was a bit off the rails, and, maybe the smooth journey was belied by what was happening in that situation. So I think that was just sort of my sonic conceptual extrapolation. But yes, at the beginning of the tune, I felt like maybe she was having other lovers, even though she does love this guy, and like, you love him more than this. And it felt like the narrator is like commenting, maybe to her specifically, like directly, or maybe just conceptually, where he's commenting on the situation, but not necessarily talking to her per se. But then I thought maybe it was, she's worried about losing him, and it was almost dangerous that, like, if there's a woman in his life, that she's going to take a very negative view to that, perhaps even do something like lashing out or being violent toward another woman who happens to come into the equation. And then by the end, again, it felt like maybe it was all this psychological worry in her head, and, I wasn't sure whether like she was getting involved with someone else, or he was involved with someone else, but more about her own insecurity or worry about the situation. So lyrically or narratively, I don't really know what's happening, but it sounds like there's a disconnect between the phrase "you love him" and whatever the real like psycho-emotional situation at hand is. So I think the vocal delivery and the sonics give me a sense that we're maybe more in her head, and whatever the real crisp and clear reality is, it might be distinct from that. It might be running along another path, and she's unable to take control of her feelings or the situation overall. So either way, I really, really enjoyed it. And it seemed like a lot of folks commented on the previous reaction that, is one of their favorite Smashing Pumpkins tune or one that really stood out to them. So yes, knowing what a masterpiece Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness is, and even understanding that some folks, may not view this album on the same level, the vibe I'm getting is that they're still in a very rich creative vein of form here. And, whether it's the songwriting, the composition, the particular sonics themselves, it seems like they're in a really good place, and I'm very much enjoying it. So, yeah, another really cool one. Do let me know what you think of this. And Luca, the horizontal but probably jumping down cat, that's her new thing. She lets me pick her up that way, but then she jumps down and then sits down, just like that. So, in any case, let me know what you think of this one, and she and I will see you next time. Peace.